I'm hitting a little bit of live, and just going to double check we're a little bit live on the old Buffalo Stampede Facebook page. And if we are, I think we are pretty good to go. Let's throw a little bit of recording onto this. And we are ready to roll. Benjamin Duffus.
Good to be here,
Duffus. Mate, it's so good to see you. And really appreciate you wearing the brightest t-shirt in your t-shirt collection.
Thank you. Got to stand out on the internet, try and catch people's eyes. They're scrolling down the Facebook feed.
Yes, you do, mate. Yes, we do. It's a tough world out there competing for people's attention. But you and me get to talk about the best sport in the world, the sport that's going to change the world. And we get to talk about one of the best events in the sport, the Buffalo Stampede. And so I just want to say first off, thank you, mate, for taking the time to join me and the community in having a chat about things, because you are someone who has been around the sport for many years now and has a great depth of knowledge. You are now like rocking and rolling full time with your coaching, and yeah, mate, looking forward to digging deep into that brain of yours and getting all the right information we need with 8.5 weeks to go leading up to the Buffalo Stampede.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really keen. I love this sort of event that, obviously Australia, we're the flattest continent on earth. So when we have these really mountainous races, we got to sort of in these, really beautiful environments, we've got to make the most of them, and really keen to do whatever I can to help people, enjoy that experience as much as possible.
Awesome, mate. Yeah. Hey, Ben, I guess like what I would ask first up is, we've got 8.5 weeks to go, right?
That 0.5 is important.
Yes, yeah, it is. Like, what can be done? Can you improve? Like, there's enough time in there. If you've done bugger all, right? You're coming off the first month of the year, New Year's resolutions haven't really gone to plan, but you've got 8.5 weeks to go, and you've signed up to the Buffalo Stampede, either marathon, 100K, even the 20K. Like, have you got time to really make some improvements?
I mean, of course, you've got time to improve. You've also got time to make mistakes. That 8.5 weeks, yes, that is a bit of time to build a bit of fitness, but also realistically, endurance is built over months and years. That big base that you've got or don't have, that's not going to change too much. Right now, we're sort of really putting the icing on the cake. This is the final sort of training block where we're not going to be doing things too radically different. We might sort of put in some really specific sessions, but ultimately, if you're coming off a rest at the moment, you're just trying to get back into running and get as fit as you can in 8.5 weeks. If you are coming off, hey, you've had a great summer of training, now's when you're really just capping things off and putting that final icing and cherry on the cake.
Beauty, mate. Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned there specific bits of training. Can you give us what they are for you? Like, if you've got this timeline, like, what are those specific bits of training you can add into the next period of time?
So one thing that really stands out for the Buffalo Stampede, whether that's the 20K, the marathon, the 100K, you've got some really steep climbs and descents. And in the marathon and in the 100K, obviously you've got the not so steep, but really long climb up Buffalo, walking down it if you're just doing the marathon like I am. And so it's really getting in that specificity for the mountains, if possible, that finding, if you're doing the 20K, it's all about that steep work, the finding the steepest fire trail you possibly can and practicing on that. Of course, if this is something that you haven't done much of, you don't want to be doing too much of that. Just one session a week would be plenty, just getting used to that sort of terrain. If you are more of a mountain goat, you've been training lots on that already, great, keep that going. This is just the time to put in those final sort of big long runs and that on that sort of terrain to really get used to it. But it is always remember where are you at and not ever changing things too much week by week, because that's when you have that risk of injury. And as I said, 8.5 weeks, that's plenty of time to also do things wrong. The most important thing is to arrive at the start line healthy and psyched, ready to go.
So, okay, getting on some steep stuff up and down, what do we do if we don't have that exact terrain around? Like, what else can we use?
Yeah, so firstly, also through this whole conversation where I'll talk about specificity and things like that, if you have nothing but flat roads and that's all you're going to train on, don't let this sort of conversation psych you out, because ultimately you just still want to get as fit as possible for any event. And well, first thing that comes to mind is Sam McCutcheon in 2016 winning the race in a pair of road shoes and off-road marathon training. So it can be done, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that approach. Sam is a very, very talented athlete. So yeah, if you have that steep hills and access to that, that's as specific as you can get. If you don't have access to that, that's where do you have staircases? If you live in the city, can you run up and down buildings? Do you even just have steep embankments? That it doesn't even have to be a really long hill, that obviously you might not have, 1,000-meter mountain on your doorstep, but do you have a 30-meter steep embankment that you might be able to access to still just practice that specific biomechanics a little bit? If you're doing strength work, definitely keep that up. Again, things like your step ups and that to try and replicate the action of running on steep terrain a bit. That's definitely a good thing, and conditioning that quads. 8.5 weeks out, if you haven't been doing that at all, I probably wouldn't go introducing anything too new at this stage. It would probably more of a risk to start introducing lots of that. Maybe finishing some sessions with a few step ups would be fine, but not too much more than that.
Brilliant, mate. Now I'm going to move slightly on to this topic about the long run. Okay. And what that means. It's quite a common thing. Like what should your longest long run be? And when should you do it? So let's use the Bright Ultra, the 100K race. Let's use that as an example. Okay. What from now, obviously, as you said, it depends a lot on what you've done leading up to this point right now. But going forward, what are the things you would consider when you're talking about your kind of long runs, your weekly long runs over the next period?
So yeah, we've touched on specificity, obviously being one thing, that if you can start making those fairly hilly, ideally same sort of vert per K of Buffalo, that would be fantastic. If not, just making it as hilly as you can, essentially, and ideally on trails. Again, if you can't, work with what you've got. Where are you at? In terms of distance and that, again, this is really what have you done previously, that no, you don't want to be making too big increments week by week. But if you've been comfortably doing 3-4 hour long runs, it would be probably keeping that up for a little bit longer. And sometime in the sort of 3 to 5 weeks out would be when I would typically be peaking the long runs. For 100K, that might be somewhere between 4 to 6 hours for most people. Occasionally, if they're going to be out there a lot longer, 15 hours plus, that might be when you might bump that up a little bit more to 7-8 hours if you're ready to handle that and you can handle that sort of mileage. But ultimately, consistency is the most important thing. That I'd much rather someone has done weeks and months of consistent 3 to 4 hour long runs than someone who has been, missed a few and then suddenly at the end does a couple of 8-hour heroic efforts. Because those final really long ones are as much as getting used to. In terms of fitness, after 3-4 hours, you're probably not getting a lot more fitness gains per se by going that extra hour or two. It's a lot of the mental games, being used to pushing what it feels like in those latter stages, and things like training the gut. How does your gut respond after 3 hours versus 6 hours? That can be completely different. Checking your gear, maybe you can get away for 3 hours and it's just a little bit of chafing, but after 6 hours, your nipples are bleeding. So you want to find these things out in advance.
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't want any nipple bleeding going out there, but
preferably not.
You can just tape them up, and I highly recommend doing that all the time. So mate, so the long run is just something I feel like, you know, you can really use to, in some regards, you know, really mimic a lot of what you do in the race. You know, carry a full pack of mandatory gear, see what it feels like running with, you know, complete water that you'll be running with as well. And for you personally, like when you're doing your long runs, do you kind of mimic what you'll eat for dinner the night before and what you have for breakfast the morning before, things like that?
If I'm going to be trying something new, then yes, definitely that for those big long runs, that's your final chance. That it's a dress rehearsal. This is your chance. Is every bit of gear, your nutrition, are you happy with all of it? Waking up at a similar time even. At this stage, I've done a lot of races and that. And so I'm pretty happy with my pre-race the day before, that routine, what I'm doing in that morning. And so I don't tend to practice it in full that much. And that's as much where doing multiple races in a year, that some of the lower key races are as much for that practice before you get to the bigger ones later on. But yeah, if this is your A race, this is the most important race in your calendar, and you haven't practiced that full nutrition the day before and everything, I would definitely recommend doing that before your final biggest sort of long runs, because you want to find out if having that pizza at dinner before the night before makes you need to poop 50 Ks in or not.
Sure. Yeah, you want to know that 100%. So, mate, I just interrupted there with the long run question, but what are the other specific things, specific sessions that you would start to incorporate leading up to, the Stampede?
So one thing that a lot of people forget to practice, and this is getting back again to that specificity, fast hiking. That going, if you're at the end of 100K, when you got to come up mixed track, you're hiking every step of that. No one's running any of it. So you really want to dial in that fast hiking, because there's as much getting your minimum pace up as much as possible, that if you're just dawdling up it, that can take a couple of hours. Whereas if you're just fast hiking, you can still get up at a decent clip. So I would try and incorporate some very specific fast hiking sessions, ideally on a steep track. If not, stairs are also really good for that. 2 at a time if you can, to try and practice those big strides going up where you are really getting that hands on knees hiking. Or if you're going to be using poles, definitely practicing with those poles so that you've got that technique again, really ingrained, really efficient. For some more advanced and experienced athletes, I would incorporate some specific fast downhill efforts for conditioning the legs, and just to work on that speed downhill as well, because descending fast it's really a skill as much as it is also a strength challenge. That's something I use very sparingly though, because obviously it has a high injury risk as well, because it's very high impact. So that is, again, if you've got any sort of niggles, particularly in the knees, I wouldn't include those sessions. So that is, things have to be feeling good before you incorporate maybe a few weeks of once every week or two doing a few fast downhill efforts in order to, condition those quads and work on that descending efficiency.
Yeah. I think poles is a really interesting one. You know, like quite often you get the question and it's like, do I use poles or do I not? And it's like, you've got to go a level deeper on that. It's like, you've got to know if you are efficient at using poles. And if you're not efficient at using poles, well, you've got to like start doing the trial and error to understand how poles can really benefit you. And then you've got to take it to the next level of like, okay, if I feel like I can make these work for me, then I've got to train with them a lot and just refine that technique. And then you'll have your answer about poles. But if you go out there and after like using them 3 or 4 times, you really don't feel like you've got that rhythm and you've got that efficiency and that technique down. It's not to say that you can't get it, but it's like you've got to make a decision after that and just say yes or no, and then reassess that at another time, because it's not as easy as like,
definitely.
Yes, you should use poles, or no, you shouldn't. It's like, can you use poles? Do you know how to? Can you like refine that technique until race data to figure it out? Yeah, what
it's
are your
definitely a
thoughts on that?
skill to use them efficiently and get particularly a lot of propulsion out of them. I think part of this might sound a little judgy, but part of the popularity of poles is if your legs are shot, pretty much anyone will appreciate them as, your quote unquote resting sticks, that anything to take the load off these shot legs, that in that situation, once your quads are blown and that, you're going to probably appreciate poles. So in that sense, having them at least as an option in a drop bag for a lot of people is a great backup in case things go wrong. But at the same time, if you are just, tip tapping them in front of you and not actually getting any drive from them, you're not going to be going any faster because of them. They more actually are probably just slowing you down, which if you tend to go out too far, something slowing you down might actually, again, help a bit there. But yeah, I totally agree with the technique that it's something that people really should be practicing. And I think really thinking about, you get your forward propulsion by driving backwards. Newton's third law, that opposite action, reaction. So you've got to be driving back with them, building up that strength, building up that conditioning there, and just getting that technique so that you are actually getting as much as possible out of them. And descending with them again, that okay, they can take a bit of load off your quads again, just a little bit, or add a little bit of stability if you're not as confident going down a steep track. Like descending's mixed track is really hard. Having a bit of extra stability by an extra point of contact can be really useful. But again, only if you know what you're doing with them, if you want to do this quickly. Otherwise, you are just sort of stepping down and almost using them as an ice axe to just jam them in and walk down. So yeah, I think this is actually quite a good course for poles if you know how to use them. That doesn't mean everyone will necessarily be better off with poles on this course. You can do very well without them as well. But there are a lot of the key climbs and descents, mixed track, clear spot, Buffalo. Those are all good tracks potentially for using poles if you like them and if you are efficient with them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I'd agree. Like, there's definitely it is one of the courses in Australia that you could, if you had it down, you could really get some benefit out of it. But you've got to be able to use them to your advantage, not as you said, not as an ice axe.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the steepness and the terrain. We've had a bit of a chat about the long runs, fast hiking, getting a bit of conditioning on the descending as well. Touched on poles. What else is the crux to Buffalo Stampede as far as you're concerned, and what should people really consider including?
So for any running event, getting as fit as possible is always just number one. That all this specificity stuff, as we said, we talked about. If you can't do it, just at the end of the day, get as fit as possible, because that's only ever going to help you. In terms of what else is really sort of crux of this, it depends a bit on the...
Let me hold you up there, Ben. Okay. What does getting as fit as possible mean? Do I just do 1 10-hour run a week and that's going to make me super fit? Or like, am I doing like 5 2-hour runs? Or like, if you had 5 runs a week, right, for the next 8 weeks, so you could train 5 times a week, what would like those 5 sessions, what would you include in those 5 sessions to get as fit as possible, if that's all you could do?
So if I'm restricted, I don't have access to specific terrain. I've got 5, and I'll just use myself here as the example so that we don't have to come with someone hypothetical. So I know I've got a good training background in that. So I'd be really focusing probably on 3 key sessions that I would be doing a long run, and I'd probably be doing 2 higher intensity sort of sessions. If one of them could be at least one of them could be a hill session, I would make it on hills, even if it was just a short hill and I'm running, go do 50 reps of the small hill that you've got, your driveway, to try and get that specificity. And then the other one would probably then be a flatter one if that was all I had access to. This far out, look, analyzing it. So what's your strengths and weaknesses? Maybe one will be a sort of shorter, faster, higher intensity session. doing, 1 to 5 minute sort of reps, aiming for 15 to 20 minutes worth of efforts. Maybe one would be a bit more of a longer efforts tempo sort of thing, where I might be doing 5 to 10 minute efforts for a total of 30 to 40 minutes work of harder efforts. If I'm nailing those, doing a long run, as I said, sort of depends on what time you have available. If I could be getting a good block of consistent 3-4 hour long runs, I'd be happy. As I said, maybe some longer ones if you got time and if things are feeling good. And then beyond that, just as much easy running as possible, essentially, for that aerobic base.
Solid. So it's like easy run, intensity session, easy run, an intensity session, or more like tempo session, and then you've got your long run. And then you've got 2 rest days in there.
And you got a couple of rest days in between. That would probably take a rest day after the long run for sure to really recover. And the other one, it sort of depends where's convenient from within there. You can sort of arrange things around. And I think at that point, it's a bit much of a muchness of don't sweat the 1%ers.
Yep. Okay, that's pretty solid, mate. That's pretty solid. I'm feeling fitter just talking about that. So that's working already.
I'm glad to hear it.
Now, mate, I just want to emphasize, and I would love to get your professional opinion about this. How do you do a rest day well? And a rest day is important to have.
Oh, I'm going to get like the cliche answer. It depends. That it depends what one means by a rest day. That do you need a day completely off all forms of exercise, do nothing but sit on the couch and eat? If you are quite exhausted, maybe that will be necessary for some people. And particularly though, if you've got, a lot of other things going on, maybe that is something beneficial for people. In others, no, I don't think everyone needs to even have a day. You can certainly be running 7 days a week and doing quite well for many people if they are recovering well. And some of those days are quite light and easy, that it's sort of relative rest. That if you're running 10, 15 hours a week, well, if you have one day where you're only doing 30, 60 minutes of very easy running, that is going to be a light day for you. So that depends there. Most people probably on that rest day, a little bit of active recovery, go for a walk, an easy ride, a swim, something like that. That's going to be fine. Keeping moving, keeping mobile. They don't need to have complete bed rest. At the same time, if you're cycling the Tour de France and you've just been doing 3 weeks of mega volume, then maybe you need a day completely off to recover.
Okay, good, mate. Yeah, not a bad answer for the old rest day. I have been told that a rest day is the most important training day of the week. So and
for some ultra runners, notoriously more is better, and so we sort of do need to sometimes drill it into people more that no, go rest, and you'll tell someone go do complete bed rest because they're still going to end up going for an hour walk. So it depends.
Yeah. Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. Okay, so back to the specificity, mate. Have you got anything else that you think is crux to preparing for this? And if you don't,
not really. I think we've touched on a lot of the really key important parts of what's the most specific. That ultimately, you don't want to be spreading things too thin. Focus on the most important things, and I think we have touched on the key crucial details.
Yeah. All right, mate. How's about this? The mental side of things. Okay. What can people do for the next, 8.5 weeks that really just focuses on their mental aptitude and their mental or their mind games, the mental side of getting ready for an endurance event like the Buffalo?
Again, it depends. But so those long runs and that we were talking about, that's ultimately your best practice for what sort of mental challenges are you going to face. And that's where previously making that argument for perhaps having 1 or 2 longer long runs as well to sort of really practice that headspace and see what sort of mental challenges do you specifically face, because everyone's going to have different challenges. One big one though for anyone, know your why. Why are you doing this? When the going gets tough and you're questioning, why am I out here? Why am I doing this to myself? I could just pull out at the next checkpoint, drink a nice cold can of Coke, and then put my feet up. What answer are you going to have to say why you're not going to do that? Are you, and that's a really individual answer. For a lot of people, connecting to some sort of higher purpose, be that inspiring others, your kids, or just, is it that connection to nature that you're out there in? Why are you going to keep going when the going gets tough? That's a big one. Beyond there, yeah, it depends. What are your specific mental challenges? Is it going to be self-doubt? Is it going to be worry about what's coming up ahead? Is it going to be, worrying about, those bleeding nipples? What is sort of going to be your biggest sort of mental challenges? That's a really personal thing, is what are your demons?
Yeah, that's some scary work, but it could definitely help you out on the old Buffalo Stampede, mate. So Ben, you're going to do the marathon, right? You're going to do the marathon out there. Now, can I ask, using yourself as an example, right? And maybe we can expand on that a little bit. What will your nutritional strategy be for the Buffalo Stampede Marathon? And what will you do in your training over the next little while to make sure that all works for you on your race day? So what's your strategy and how do you practice that in your training?
So personally, my nutritional strategy is super simple. So I guess, so I work with Infinite Nutrition. And so I have a specific formula that they've made up for me. I'm having 75 grams of carbs per hour. And so I just literally powder, make it up.
I'm just having a bit of that right now. This is a bit of Ben's special formula.
So I just make that up
carbs
per hour. I make that up into a little concentrate that I'll be sipping on and then supplementing that with plain water. And I just literally have my watch beeping at me every 10 minutes, telling me to take a sip. I take a sip of the nutrition, wash it down with water to thirst, repeat. I'm fortunate there that though my gut is quite fussy about what I actually then put in, I don't get sick of the same thing. I can just be sipping on the same formula for 15 hours straight and I don't get sick of it, don't have any gut issues there. So it's just, keeping it super simple for me. And so I just practice that exact routine in my long runs and know that my gut can tolerate that, handles it well, and stable energy all day. So that's lucky that, again, have practiced a lot and sort of dialed that in, that I know what works for me there. For other people, if you're trying to mix in a variety of sort of solids and gels and drinks and that, then that can take a bit more planning and forethought.
So if you were, say, doing the 100K, would your strategy be the same?
Pretty much, yeah. So these sort of distances where I'm looking at, between those sort of durations for me, 3 hours versus 4 hours, 3-4 hours, pretty much from 3 hours up to about sort of 15 hours. My nutritional strategy doesn't change too much really there. That if we're starting to talk about overnight efforts and that, you might have to start jigging things up a bit. But in that sort of whole realm, I find, I don't need to tweak things too much. The exception sort of being that particularly as it gets longer, perhaps by the end, if your gut is starting to not tolerate things quite as well, then it might drop it back. That 75 grams per hour of carbs per hour is relatively high, can certainly afford to drop that down quite a bit and still be okay, especially in the latter stages where you're not having to worry about as much, what's it going to be like in 3 hours time, because you're hopefully finishing in 1 or 2 hours.
Yeah, for sure. So, so when within your training week can you practice your nutrition? Like, what can you get the biggest bang out of buck when you're training your nutrition? Because, like, obviously the long run is a key time where you can practice your nutrition, but can you incorporate it in any of your other training runs?
Certainly that it can. And look, it depends how much of an issue it is for you. That for some people, their gut really is their limiting factor in particularly ultra marathons, in which case most sessions are an opportunity to start training the gut, because the gut is quite trainable. But it's not fun. Just like training has to be, kind of be hard and difficult in order to reap the benefits. Same sort of thing, that you do need to stress your gut in order to get those adaptions. And so stuff like doing a higher intensity session, taking on that nutrition during it, and that really will challenge it, or making sure that if you know that you sometimes struggle with, that you need some solids during a race, but you usually don't eat before you work out, purposely eating something before you work out, and so that you get used to having that food in your gut and digesting it and challenging it while you're going for those runs. That I personally, for years and years and years and years, I used to do the vast majority of my runs first thing in the morning, and so it was just natural to have to do them fasted. But it meant that as soon as I ate anything and went for a run, my gut was just awful. And so that was a big thing for me, to start trying to actually purposely have a pre-run snack on that, so that my gut could handle having some solids. I mean, I still couldn't go eat a full meal and then go for, eat a whole pizza and then go for a run immediately afterwards, but I'm a lot better than I was.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Hey, like it's like the stomach is like a muscle that you can train and that you need to train, especially when you're going long, and eating is such a critical component to having success at kind of like any trail race, really. Especially when you're looking at anything over that kind of 90 minutes to 2 hour mark, which which pretty much every event at Buffalo Stampede would be, except for possibly the 10K for a couple of people.
Yeah, even by the 20K, but 10K, I don't think I would take anything on board. By 20K, I wouldn't be probably doing the full 75 grand, but I would still be sipping on a little bit. But once it's sort of, getting up over 90 minutes, I think there is a benefit to at least some carbohydrates, some sort of sugary solution, and that. And just particularly if it's a hot day, still having some water on you.
Water is a whole nother thing, right? Like we talked about nutrition, and really that speaks a lot to the kind of the calorie intake of things. What is your thoughts on the water and how much per hour? Now I know you're going to say that depends, but
because it depends.
Because it depends, of course. It's very, very personal. But how do you explore that, and how do you trial and error that element?
Yeah, and look, that's a really hard element, because so much of it depends on your physiology and the conditions on the day. We've seen Buffalo where it's been freezing, snow at the top of Mount Buffalo, and we've seen years where it's boiling hot, over 30 degrees down in the valley. Your fluid intakes for when it's snowing versus boiling are two very different things. And so I would always err on the side of carrying a little too much. So this is where you've just got to practice in training and find out in different conditions, what do I need? There's really no substitute for that of practice, trial and error. And if in doubt, I'd usually lean towards carrying a little bit extra, because it's better to get to a checkpoint, realize, I carried an extra 300 mil of water that I can now just chuck out. Oh, well, then to find out, I'm still 45 minutes away from the next checkpoint and I've run out of water and I'm really thirsty. Because, carrying those extra 300 grams, that would have slowed you down that 0.1%, but running out of water 45 minutes early and getting dehydrated, you could DNF ultimately because of that.
Yeah. The latter example you use definitely sounds like something Dave Byrne would do. Ben, I don't know if you know Caroline Duffus, but she asked, are you going to get past Duffus Drop?
I mean, I hope so. I really hope. Well, actually, they've rerouted the course now, so it no longer goes through Duffus Drop. So by default, yes, I should.
Brilliant, mate. That's good news. Yes. We did get a a number of handwritten letters from an anonymous person asking us to reroute around Duffus Drop. So if that was Ben,
that was not me. I'm actually slightly disappointed because, those who know my history of the race know that I have when it was the 75K, collapsed at the same point twice now. And so I really wanted to actually get it right and go through there. But now they've tweaked that bit. I mean, I like the new route. It's just more on a personal level that I don't know. I'll have to do it solo or something one day just for the personal vindication.
I do remember jogging slowly past you as you were stumbling on the 75K back in 2016. That was a moment I didn't expect to see, but that Duffus Drop sure does.
You were looking strong.
Oh well, thank you very much. Yeah, I carried that extra 300 ml of water. That's why.
Exactly.
So, mate, what would you do in terms of key strength exercises to increase your speed? That question comes from Rowan.
So in this final sort of period, key exercises. So in this, look, anything sort of leg based, obviously, and sort of I would tend to lean towards more dynamic unilateral sort of exercises. But again, this is always meeting people where they're at in terms of how dynamic and that do you make it. Like if we take a simple lunge, right, you might do just a split squat with your feet stationary, which could be advanced to having either a step forward or a step back, advance that to walking lunges, advance that to jumping lunges, and then starting to add in various sort of variations. So I've just given there like a handful of exercises that I'm a big fan of. I've mentioned step ups and step downs, particularly sort of there with the step down, sort of really focusing on the slow controlled eccentric portion for conditioning those quads is I find a really, really good one. Lots of sort of jumping, sort of light sort of plyometric. So I don't think for ultra runs, we need to do really, like you see on Instagram when people are doing these death jumps off, a 2 meter stack of foam or something. We don't need to do that sort of high intensity where it's more just lots of sort of single leg sort of hopping, skipping, and little sort of variations and those jump lunges and that I mentioned. So if I had to pick one exercise there, those jump lunges I've mentioned a few times, sort of big fan of those. But from it does depend a lot on what are you able to control on that, which is why being very sort of hesitant in giving one single answer. But I would be focusing more towards sort of more dynamic. So you're sort of replicating more the velocities at which you're going to be moving, still going to be a bit slower than actual running, but sort of, more dynamic. And so again, sort of higher repetition, that the muscular endurance is, very crucial. That I know it's very in vogue. A lot of people will push sort of really low rep, high weight, but if you're not trained or prepared for that, you don't have that form really dialed in, that can be really high risk. So I wouldn't be introducing anything like that now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like, that's something that really taxes you in a different way, like really taxes your central nervous system. And as you said, you've got to have the right technique when you're playing around with high weight, low rep kind of stuff. Sticking around, I assume that you're probably referring more to kind of like the 10 to 15 rep range.
10, 15, 20 reps, that sort of 10 to 20 rep range more. And in terms of where natural research looks at because although for sort of 5K sort of races, there is evidence that you get from the lower reps a good increase in running economy, and that can then translate. There isn't that same evidence at the longer distances. All the evidence has looked at sort of what we can test in a gym tends to suggest it is just all about, surprise, surprise, muscular endurance.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I'd say, Rowan, like, you've got lunges, single legs, you've got split legs, you've got your squats as well. There's a range of different squats you can do. You can do them again, like both legs, single leg, and then other things like calf raises to really tackle that
calf raises, really big one. I would also, if possible, if you can do seated calf raises to really hit the soleus more, then the standing ones you're hitting more the gastroc, the big ball at the top of the calf, whereas it's the deep long muscle along the rest of the back of the shin, the soleus, that is most used during running. And that one you have to sort of either bent legged if you can only do standing calf raises, or if you're fortunate enough to have a seated calf raise machine at a gym or a Smith machine, you can essentially rig it up doing the seated calf raises for the soleus. Again, a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. Solid, mate. Solid. Good old Dave Byrne asked, what shoes would you recommend, mate? Which, to be fair, is actually quite a legitimate question in many regards. Aside from the obvious, because the course at Buffalo does have a mix of, you know, small sections of road, but then it's got some real gnarly trail. You know, like, do you go, like you said before, Sammy McCutcheon ran the whole course in road shoes back in 2016 and won the 75K. But like, what do you aim for with regards to the shoes? Like, what kind of a balance do you strike with cushioning and grip, and where does that land for you?
So yeah, shoes always a very personal thing in terms of what works best for you, and you need to find what's comfortable for you. I would definitely lean towards something with more grip if possible, because for the steep descents in particular, you're really going to appreciate having that bit of extra grip. It can be done in road shoes, but you're probably going to feel a lot more secure in something with really good grip. But as you mentioned, Majell, so apart from the 10K and 20K, you don't have to do too much road, a tiny bit at the start and finish, but finish for the 20K. For the marathon and for particularly the 100K, you've got a bit more of that sort of flatter or actually on road. So it does have to still then be something which you feel comfortable running on the road. It doesn't have to be your ideal road shoe, but sometimes some shoes where they are just all about thin sole, huge lugs, like your fell runners, and that will tend to wear, they may not be very comfortable at all on the road. So I also wouldn't go all the way to that extreme. Personally, I'm going to be running in the Speedgoat 5s, where it's got that grip, got a lot of cushion. I like a lot of cushioning that, and I think that really helps on that descent. But yeah, that's a personal thing in terms of what shoe exactly will work for you.
Yeah, that's awesome advice, mate. I'd have to agree with that. Pretty interested to hear how you got a pair of Speedgoat 5s when, mate, but we can talk about that later on. I think Speedgoat 4s are readily available, which
Speedgoat 5 will be readily available before Buffalo Stampede, I'm told.
Excellent. That's exciting news. Is that an exclusive, Ben?
No, I'm told that wasn't exclusive.
Okay, excellent. Cool. We don't have to edit that out, even though we're live. I'm awkward. It's awkward. I'm finding this awkward. Let's move on quickly. Joshua Drake has a legitimate question. Not to say that Dave's wasn't, but is there anything specific you would do to aid recovery post long run or post race?
So recovery in general, I always think the big three are sleep, food, and chilling out, basically relaxation. That all the other stuff, like I love, hopping on the foam roller in front of the TV and things like that. But those three are really the big three that you need to be fueling your training and recovery well. You need to be getting adequate sleep, and then just general life stress. And that's obviously much easier said than done. Like, life is generally stressful, but trying to find that balance that if things are a bit out of whack, I wouldn't be trying to squeeze in an extra hour for all these other things to go, trying to do these extra modalities, if actually just finding that balance and reducing general stress levels, because that's going to have the biggest effect. That those extra little things that, I'm a big fan of regular, foam rolling and triggering and massage, and that feels really good. And I find, when I'm in my heaviest training, that helps sort of keep on top of some of those tighter spots and that. But those are sort of the 1%ers, and that nutrition, sleep, relaxation, they're more of the 99%ers.
Sweet. How much sleep do you try to get a night, mate?
Personally, it's sort of the standard sort of 8 hours is what I'm generally sort of aiming for. I take a little longer. So when I'm heavy training, it's more like 8 to 9 hours. Personally, I find I need to feel rested. If it's sort of a lighter period, more like 7 to 8. Yeah, that's a personal thing. And yeah, but I certainly feel it very quickly if I'm not getting adequate sleep.
Yeah. It's probably been a while since you slipped on the old Dunlop volleys for a race, mate. But Lincoln said that they've got pretty good grip, don't they? Would you say yes, or would you say no to that one?
I have not tried running down's mixed track and Dunlop volley, so I cannot actually confirm or deny. I have run down mixed track in road shoes actually, and I didn't die, so it worked out okay. But yeah, the Dunlop volleys, if that's what you love, if you've tried it on lots of steep fire trails and that's what works well for you, go for
it. Mate, what advice have you got for ultra bad sleep, including burning legs after a big hard run?
So having trouble sleeping after a long run and your legs are burning afterwards.
Yeah. Lincoln asked that. Yeah.
First off, it sounds like you've probably overcooked it, that you probably need to dial back that long run to something slightly more sustainable, that if it is genuinely hard enough that you're having that sort of reaction, that's quite common after, an actual ultra race, that people have trouble sleeping and that afterwards because you're all amped up. But I mean, one would be, what time of day are you finishing that? Are you doing that run first thing in the morning, or are you finishing that a long run in the evening and trying to go to sleep right away? But yeah, if you earlier in the day would probably be preferable. If you are already doing that and that is a common problem, well, if you have a genuine sleep disorder, that's something you need to see a doctor for. But otherwise, if it is just a training sort of load thing, that might be where you need to look at, well, if you're feeling that beat up and not then sleeping well afterwards, that perhaps you need to address that training load, that maybe those long runs are too long and too hard for your current ability to adapt to it, that you've sort of pushed beyond the point of diminishing returns.
Yeah, knowing a little bit about Lincoln's training schedule, it's normally like no running all week, go out, do 12-hour run, and then don't run.
I think my legs should be pretty sore after that as well.
So another question, mate, is are there any benefits in cross training for ultra distance events, like including the bike, cross trainer, elliptical, etc.? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there certainly can be benefits for some people in some situations, that if you are building up mileage in that and you still have basically the capacity to, energetically in that, and you can still recover and do more volume, but your body can't quite handle more running, then yes, that can build more strength and fitness through that cross training. Ultimately, the running is the most important thing. But yeah, cross training can certainly have a role in that as a supplementary form of training. Or if you're managing injuries, that again, if you get a niggle and you need to take 3 days off running, but you can still ride a bike, great. That way you can still keep that fitness up, keep working out during that time, and then minimize any potential downsides of having that time off running. And even then, just as a light recovery session that we've referred to before about those rest days and active recovery, that can then be another great role, that it's just something gentle to get the blood flowing, get moving, get that mobility back, get all the nutrients going to the right places. That's another potential role that personally I'll still usually year round, even in the thick of it, include a little bit of cycling and that as for exactly that purpose, that it's just another little light session, not meant to be too hard or taxing, but it is just more for you feel better afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's amazing when you do look at a few of the, like, I mentioned his name again, but Dave Byrne speaks pretty highly of the some of the European athletes and the way they integrate cycling into their training load, and of course, like, it being such a lower impact movement is a huge thing when training in running is such a high impact, such a high impact thing.
Yeah, that it's a real contention. As we know, like there are a lot of top European athletes who take the whole winter off to go ski-mo and then are doing a lot of cycling and that during the summer still, and they prove that, hey, you can still run really well, particularly over these longer distances off all that. Particularly for climbing, you can build a lot of, you can get really fit for climbing basically purely off cross training. I've had times where I've been injured and had been almost purely cross training and then still gone and done vertical races that I've been really happy with, because it is purely uphill and it is just that concentric contractions of that. And so it is quite like, getting out of the saddle on the bike or the stair trainer at the gym and that. And so you can still get really fit for climbing. I think the specificity descending, you still need to, there is no substitute for running in terms of getting that specific conditioning, but you can get really fit and perform quite well off a lot of cross training.
Yeah. What about, what are your thoughts, mate? Lenny just asked, what are your thoughts on double days, like 2 runs a day, say like in the morning and in the evening?
Yeah, works really well for a lot of people, but not for everyone. That again, it sort of depends. That and I guess with that question, it's always funny how people, it's like, okay, if I've got 2 hours to train, should I do 2-hour run or should I do 2 1-hour runs? Well, there's certainly benefits to doing some longer runs and that in there, and doing those 2-hour plus runs in order to get conditioned for these longer distances. Advantage or so you have that specific conditioning advantage of doing your double runs is that you get to you might be able to do it a touch quicker because you've got that sort of time to recover in between. It might be easier to fit in that you can do it as your run commutes to and from work. And there are certain physiological arguments as well. So for instance, your connective tissues, which are the potential gain you get to the connective tissues pretty much get saturated after about 10 minutes, and then it takes about another 6 to 8 hours before you're going to sort of reset and be able to get and stimulate that same thing again. So that can be an argument for splitting up and doing double sessions, that you get the double dose of that stimulus. So there is a reason that you see a lot of the best sort of athletes in the world doing multiple sessions per day, that it helps you do a higher training load. There are the arguments there for how it could enhance recovery, but for other people might find that actually they break down too quickly, that they just can't handle doing a second session in the afternoon. They need more like 24 hours to fully recover from that run and be ready to go. So 8.5 weeks out, probably not the time to start experimenting too much, but it is in general something interesting to see. But getting back to my point before earlier about relaxation and fitting things in, that for a lot of people also, it's just easier to train once a day to fit that in around life. Run commutes and that can be an exception of how it can sometimes be easier to train twice a day. So it's finding that balance, that there are arguments for and against doubles versus singles.
Yeah. Sweet, mate. Hey, just a pretty specific question to a very small amount of people that live in Brisbane. But what trails would you suggest up in Brisbane specifically for getting out and training for Buffalo?
So I do most of my training on Mount Cootha. And so for the steeper ones, then for practicing for those steep trails, you'd be looking at Chapel Hill, Kokoda, Reservoir trails. And then there are plenty of other for Buffalo, for that sort of longer, more gradual climb, that's sort of the rest, that, Honey Eater, Mahogany, Powerful Owl are all good ones. And Jacksonia, all good ones. But I think actually, so this is very niche for Brisbane people, that if you want a really specific Buffalo Stampede session, I would head over to Camp Mountain, because the chainsaw track, that is probably as close as we have to anything like mixed track. So I would practice going down and up that. And then you've got on the other side of Camp Mountain, the much more gradual tracks, which is more like a sort of Buffalo. So you can do some reps of chainsaw and then go do, I forget the name of the more gradual ones, but then getting a best of both worlds. So I think that would be the most specific possible Buffalo session you could do in Brisbane.
Geez, sounds like you guys live in Harry Potter's world or something with that kind of a trail resume.
It's quite a good place as a trail runner, that we're really lucky having Mount Cootha being this big network of trails just 10, 15 minutes from the CBD. And that all branches out into national park. You can, Brisbane Trail Ultra or Guzzler Ultra, where we have 100K, 100 miles, all on trails starting out from, almost right next to the CBD.
No, we're not here to recommend other races, mate. So,
that's true. Sorry.
Let's just move on. Let's move on quickly from that one.
Awkward. I was plugging Brisbane too much.
Put a cap on it, mate. It's too hot up there. Don't do any races in Brisbane.
Oh, it was really hot today. This has been it's pretty brutal at the moment. It's good mental training.
Well, that segues to probably one of our final questions of the night, mate. But we did touch on it a little bit before with the mental side of training. I don't know if Lincoln got to hear what we spoke about then, but he asked specifically, do you do any specific mental or psych training in your training week and leading up to races?
Yes, is the short answer. So in one sense, getting out there every day is an opportunity to try something slightly different. That some of those mental challenges. Living in Brisbane, I always say sort of between October through to April, you're training your mind. May through to September is when you train your legs because of the heat and humidity. That every day, well, most days, it can be quite a bit of a slog trying to survive that heat. And so every time you have that challenge, it's leaning into it, embracing it, and learning, where does your mind go? And then getting to practice sort of different techniques. And I'll play around with lots of sort of different mantras and visualizations as you sort of see what works. That it might be, at higher intensities, and that might just be something really simple like push, or something like that. Or if it might be some real positive sort of affirmations that where you're telling yourself that I am strong, I'm fast, those sort of things, even when you're not necessarily feeling that way, trying to make it become your reality. And in terms of, before a big event, the sort of the visualizations and that every sort of run, I'll sort of be going over the race a bit in my head, not just sort of fantasizing that, yes, there is certainly that element to it of what's the perfect race, how do I want to execute it, but also then thinking about what could go wrong so that if it happens on race day, so nothing's a surprise, that once you've concocted the worst possible situation in your head where everything's gone horrible and you've practiced in your head getting over that and overcoming that, then as things crop up, you can then implement it, you're ready to go. Because often that element of surprise, it sort of catches people. If they were always thought that, it's going to be this perfect fun day, and now their nipples are bleeding. We're going to keep saying bleeding nipples throughout this interview. They don't know what to do because they never practice that in their head. And so, but if you go, no, as Maj said, I'm gonna have a bit of tape ready to go at the aid station, I can just tape it up. Okay, not such a big shock.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. I think one of our new mantras is going to be, I'm a powerful owl.
I'm a powerful owl.
Yeah. That's the recommendation. If there's one takeaway from this evening, that's it, I reckon. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to when we have everyone, coming up next track, just saying to themselves, I am a powerful owl.
Unreal. I think we've changed the world of trail running right here, right now. Hey, mate, really appreciate your time and your energy and your knowledge, and really appreciate you being the awesome person that you are. So, mate, thanks so much for joining us this evening. I think we've covered all the questions, and I feel like there is more than enough there for people to take something from and really apply it to, like we said, the next kind of 8.5 weeks leading up to Buffalo Stampede. And if they want to get in touch with you, they can do that via the Mile 27 coaching page, right?
Yeah, to the Mile 27 coaching page's contact page, or my email is just ben@mile27.com.au if you have any specific questions.
That's awesome, mate. Well, mate, is there anything else you want to leave people with?
Have fun. Enjoy it. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's why we do it. That I hope these talks don't ever psych you out. They just give you inspiration. That this event, I remember before I first did it, a lot of people sort of talking about, some of these steep tracks that we've mentioned and joked around, and, it can sometimes get talked up like it's impossible, but then you go out and you do it because you have no choice. You're out there. You have to do it. You do it. And it's doable. All these people have done this race before, so you can too.
That's it, mate. Yeah. At the end of the day, you know, one step at a time, hey, and then happy days, right?
Exactly.
Beautiful, mate. You nailed it. Finished it on an absolute winner of a piece of advice. And Benny, we look forward to seeing you, mate, down in the sunny bright. Hopefully it's sunny, and at that very first weekend in April, man. So
well, I don't mind if there's snow again. That looks really cool and novel. So whatever it is, conditions you can't control. So just accept it as it is and enjoy the experience.
Well, mate, we look whatever's comes. We look forward to seeing you down there. All right, mate. Thanks heaps again for your time.
See you all soon.